Hi, I'm Chloe. I wanted to talk about the circumstances which enabled me to overcome selective mutism. My selective mutism was worst when I was 19 years old, but overall the worst decade for it was from 11 through 21. And those were the years in which selective mutism was really preventing me from social interactions and making friends. It turned out that I only made one friend in that decade when I was 16 years old, but that was a very important friend. He came to the school I was at. He had moved and joined my class when I was 16. So he was a new kid at school, and he was like the antithesis of what I was in terms of his social expertise. He was extremely talented at making friends, at making conversation, knowing the right thing to say. And so pretty much the first thing he did in coming to a new situation like that was to make friends with everybody in the class. Of course, I was probably the last person that he talked to, because why would anybody want to talk to me? Because I wasn't going to say much back. Anyway, he somehow had this extreme ability at knowing just what to say, even to somebody with selective mutism, that I was actually able to talk back and talk with him. We became friends, and I think a significant event happened about a year later. I was going for my interview at a university where I was applying, and he offered to come with me because it happened to be in his hometown, so we took a train there. And it was the first time that he'd really seen me outside of the school environment, where things were actually worse for me than they were at school. We arrived in the city a little before lunchtime, and my interview wasn't until the afternoon, and so he asked me what I'd like to do for lunch, and he probably meant what kind of restaurant would I like to go to. But I was too embarrassed to tell him that if we went to a restaurant, he would have to order the food for me. I just didn't, we weren't close enough yet that I could admit such a thing to him. So I said, well, I'm going to eat chocolate for lunch, and that was a pretty easy thing for me to do, because I could go into a shop that had chocolate, grab a few large chocolate bars, and plunk them down on the counter, and I wouldn't have to say anything, and there was lunch. I think he thought that was a little odd, but I think it was the start of him figuring out that I had really serious social anxiety issues, including selective mutism. I was actually able to get through the interview with, very short sentences in reply to questions. It's something I would not have been able to do 2 years later when I was at university. 19, I simply wouldn't have been able to go to an interview. But I was still on the downhill slope at age 17. Anyway, my friend, he kind of figured out what he needed to do for me, and he was extremely kind and patient over the course of several years, and he would simply allow me the opportunity to be social and to talk without pushing me to do it. And you know, it took a couple of years of him inviting me to parties, and he had parties all the time. He was extremely social, had a lot of friends, and you know, I just had him. So it took a couple of years before I actually accepted an invitation to go to a party. And he'd do other things too, like we'd go to a pub together, and he'd figured out by then that he would need to order the beers. I couldn't order my own. And you know, we'd sit and just the two of us would talk, and you know, then he threw in these little extra things, like he would have invited some of his friends to come join us at the pub, and this gave me an opportunity which at first I wasn't able to take. I simply sat silently drinking my beer and watched and listened to him and his other friends talking, and you know, I wanted to learn how to do this. I really looked up to my friend as someone who had all this expertise that I had none of. And you know, eventually I was able to talk with him in front of his friends, and I was also able to go to parties that he invited me to and talk with him. And then, you know, eventually there comes this little step where I'm talking with him at a party, and he goes away to talk to other people, and I'm standing there alone, and just, oh my gosh, well, I think a lot of you know how scary that would be. You know, the thought of somebody coming up to me and trying to make conversation with me, and I'd have to reply. I think even if you don't have selective mutism, at least if you have social anxiety disorder, you know just how scary that is. And I think I was able to do it eventually by, ahead of time, I would rehearse at home. Sorry, the memory card ran out, so I took a break. I'll pick up. So I was saying that I used to rehearse what I was going to say at parties, like trying to imagine all the different things people might say to me, and formulate a response. So these would be in my mind when I went to a party, and hopefully when people talked to me, I would already have something more or less worked out to say back. And so eventually, you know, I was gradually able to become more and more spontaneous in that, and by the time I was 21, I was able to do this kind of thing by myself without assistance from my friend, and I started making friends by myself. And eventually I pretty much overcome selective mutism by the time I was 24. Although, as I mentioned in the other video, sometimes it did come back to bite me, but I'd say it was done by the time I was 24. And oh boy, I'm so thankful. I was so thankful to have overcome it. You'll probably realize that I ate large amounts of chocolate in university. The good thing is that it's an essential nutrient. That's what I've heard. And even if it isn't, it certainly should be. Thanks for listening.